ask some questions about the Member of Parliament staff review of the Member of Parliament staff bullying and harassment policy. So I want to note that I think it's really good, having seen the media reports and hear from my staff, that there's a review underway of the bullying and harassment policy, which I understand that the staff and union reps have raised with the department in recent weeks. So can you update us where that's currently at?
Yes, Senator, happy to do that. We initiated the consideration of undertaking a review of the existing workplace bullying and harassment policy and procedures for MOPS Act staff at the end of last year, in light of a process that we go through on a regular basis in terms of reviewing a range of policies. In this context, we thought it was appropriate to consider whether the existing policy could be specifically strengthened in relation to providing additional guidance around sexual harassment in the workplace, in terms of a clear definition about that, clearer information about procedures for raising complaints in relation to sexual harassment, and providing more information around other aspects of helping to address sexual harassment in the workplace. We looked to guidance for the Australian Human Rights Commission in terms of a best practice approach for these type of workplace policies. And so we've made those amendments, and we're now working through the process of consulting with MOPS Act staff to get feedback on that.
Right, and so what's the timeline then of adopting it as a new policy? And what sort of feedback are you getting from the staff and the union?
Well, we're still in the consultation period, so 2 March is when is the deadline for hearing back from people on the committee in terms of their feedback, and then we'll consolidate and consider that before seeking a Special Minister of State's approval in relation to the revised policy.
And so you said that this review of this policy was undertaken as part of a review. So what's the usual process for reviewing these types of policies and the conditions of MOPS Act staff? In relation to policies, I think obviously consult with the relevant minister in terms of proceeding to review a policy, and then engaging through the Workplace Relations Committee associated with MOPS Act staff. So what prompts the review?
Well, there could be a range of factors. I think it's just from time to time we look at relevant policies and consider whether it is appropriate to update them.
So do you have a specific time, a specific schedule of that this policy was adopted and it's got a 5-yearly review or something like that?
Look, I'd need to check with Mr Ford if there's been any historical pattern, but I think as it is in the case in departments and other organisations, it is just a periodic issue of considering when it's appropriate to revise policies.
Really, we don't have a formal time frame in terms of reviewing every particular policy that we might administer, but it's really important, and it's not just within MAPS, right across the department, that we look at our policies and modernise them. And it's really just about best practice and trying to keep.
So you haven't. There's not a formal time trigger for any of them.
There's no particular trigger. I mean, there could be a trigger. It might be as simple as the Human Rights Commission might issue new advice, or the APSC might issue new advice on a particular policy, and that might prompt an agency to review the policies that relate to that, and we're no different.
So, I mean, how many other equivalent type of policies are there, and what's the process? Are you looking at reviewing a whole raft of policies, given that you're reviewing this one?
So it's really about ongoing improvement, ongoing that ongoing search to maintain best practice arrangements. I couldn't actually tell you how many policies there are. that we administer. I mean,
can take that on
we could
notice,
probably
though.
take it
Yeah,
on
we can take it
notice.
on
And are you reviewing other ones at the moment, or is it just the bullying and sexual harassment one that's being reviewed at
I would
present?
think at any point in time we're reviewing more than one policy.
Well, so what other ones are you reviewing at the moment?
Might just have to consult with my colleagues. So,
Or we could take it on notice, which might save some time from consulting.
okay. So the only other one at the moment is the enterprise agreement guidelines.
The enterprise agreement
Guidelines.
Okay.
Yes.
And so the instance, I mean, I've been told that essentially it was staff raising concerns about this one that sort of prompted its review. Is that the case?
I wasn't aware of that.
No.
Was there staff
No,
raising
Sandra?
concerns?
I don't think it was in direct response to any particular concerns that have been raised, but I think, obviously the issue is something that,
It's in the public eye at the
It is
moment.
in the public eye, but in looking at our policy, we sort of assessed that there was a lack of guidance specifically around sexual harassment, and so that it would be appropriate to look at what the Australian Human Rights Commission were providing in terms of a guidance for best practice, and then consider to address it.
And do you know when the existing one that's now about to be superseded, when that was last reviewed?
I think it was 2015.
That's right.
2015.
Right.
So it's been quite a while.
Yep. And once the review is completed, how is the department going to engage with parliamentarians and their staff to make sure that they're aware of their responsibilities under the policy?
Okay, so there's a number of avenues for us to do that, but once we finalise the policy and it's been approved or endorsed, we will circulate it to all senators and members. We will do that. We haven't consulted with the SMOS yet, but the SMOS might want to do that with parliamentarians. But it would be via circular email. We would incorporate the new policy into office manager training and other training sessions that we might provide. We'll put the policy on the website. We'll make sure that it's reported back to the Workplace Health and Safety Committee, and representatives on that committee also have roles in communicating advice to the people they represent. But I guess on an ongoing basis, whenever new senators' members might start, we'll incorporate that into their induction sessions, and then we'll go from there.
Mm. So in terms of, particularly with parliamentarians, will there be training offered, or what's planned?
So I think you're getting a bit ahead of yourself. Obviously, I mean, right now we're in the process of, or the department rather, is in the process of consulting on the content of a proposed policy, and in the usual course of events, in relation to other such policies, there is training as appropriate. But in terms of the specific arrangements on how any changed or further clarified policy, because I mean there is an overall policy, of course, that deals with bullying and harassment. But I mean, this is now, taking a more specific focus. I mean, how that is best dealt with in making sure that, to make sure that there's appropriate compliance across the board. I mean, I think that is stuff that is. I mean, these are decisions that are yet to be worked through, in light of the consultation that is taking place with relevant stakeholders at the moment.
I mean, certainly, I presume in my Senate induction that it was probably the existing bullying and sexual harassment policy was given to me. I must admit, I didn't pay much attention to it. Certainly there was no process of bringing it particularly to my awareness, and I don't recall training having been offered to me as a new senator on it.
Well, in the end, I mean, I guess every member of parliament is responsible and accountable for his or her own conduct. I mean, in the end, I mean, the department has a role in relation to employees. I mean, executive government can provide advice and guidance, but in the end, every individual member of parliament who is not an employee of the government, every individual member and senator, obviously encouraged to consider relevant guidance and advice that is provided, in the public domain, is ultimately responsible and accountable for their own conduct.
Yeah, I'm certainly aware of that, Minister, but it's a tricky situation because our staff are employees of the department, of the Parliament, and so they're responsible to have a safe working environment.